So, Ron, maybe this is now the right time to talk about Netscape.
Yes, because we're about 50 companies investing just in internet companies. But there's this overarching dilemma that you cannot put your finger on, but we're not going anywhere without it. And in hindsight, it's 2020, it's easy to see. But back then, it wasn't easy to see. We were grappling around saying, we weren't saying it, but founders were saying it. Hey, this internet thing is not going to be usable until people and users have a way to access all of this information. The amount of information in the world is unfathomable. And this thing called the internet was supposed to give you access to that information. But there was no friendly, practical way to access all this huge corpus of valuable information that was going to make people productive. And along came a person named Jim Clark. Jim Clark had founded several companies in Silicon Valley, including Sun Microsystems. He was a co-founder there. And after Jim Clark retired, Jim Clark put his finger on this issue. How are people going to find a friendly way to access and interact with this information corpus? And he rooted around and found out that there was a group of engineers at the University of Illinois that were doing research on this and had this thing called a browser. And this thing called a browser was a user-friendly interface to access all the information on the internet. And Jim Clark flew to the University of Illinois and went and talked to the lead engineer, Mark Andreessen, and found out there were other engineers, probably 4 or 5 of them, that were working on this project. And he said to them, please come to Silicon Valley and start a company to commercialize the browser. And John Doerr at Kleiner Perkins and I, by then Kleiner Perkins was arguably neck and neck with Sequoia.
Okay.
Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia. But Jim Clark was affiliated with Kleiner Perkins. Why don't you come out? We're going to start a company with Kleiner Perkins and me funding you. The engineers said yes. They jumped on an airplane in their bare feet and came to California. So I'm merrily doing these one-off investments with Ben Rosen. And my good friend Mike Homer, who had a career at Apple Computer and then retired from Apple Computer and started dabbling on his own. Mike Homer, we need to digress because he was an engineer who went to UC Berkeley, but probably the most affable engineer on earth, could communicate ideas crystal clear, had tons of charisma, one of the wittiest persons on earth, and also one of the smartest people on earth, especially from a practical point of view. So Mike Homer found out about Netscape and took a consulting job there.
How were you friends with Mike?
We're friends of Mike Homer because Mike hung out with Bill Campbell. Our kids went to school with the Campbell kids. Bill was the VP of sales and marketing at Apple. Mike Homer worked for Bill Campbell, and Mike and Bill were really close. We would go to all the kids' baseball games and then go drinking at the Oasis in Menlo Park and hang out together. We would also go to civilized dinners together, but we would hang out a lot at the Oasis in Menlo Park.
Okay.
So I knew Mike was part of the Bill Brigade. So we had become good friends of Mike. Because Mike is so smart, when I'm angel investing in this thing called the internet, Mike and I would always banter about this thing called the internet. And one day we're having drinks and Mike says, hey, I'm consulting at this really interesting company called Netscape, because he was dabbling but not going anywhere. So I said, oh my God, if you're consulting, you've put a stake in the ground that you think something big's happening at this company. And Mike Homer said, yes, something big is happening at this company. So this is how I found out about Netscape, is Mike gave me a heads up. And I said, so what does Netscape do? And he goes, we have this thing called a browser that allows you to interact and access all of the information on the web. And I said, oh my God, this is the explosion.
Yeah.
This will allow founders to actually start companies because they can access all the information on the internet. So Netscape literally unlocked the internet the way that ChatGPT has unlocked AI. Without Netscape, the internet wouldn't be here. Now, if Netscape didn't happen, there'd be another Netscape. The invention was going to happen, or the engineering project was going to happen. Jim Clark happened to be the one to say, I'm going to go look for this. I do remember rumblings that Jim Clark knew that there had to be a way to access information on the web, and he was looking. And fast forward, Mike Homer says, I'm consulting for this company called Netscape, Jim Clark, and I go, ding, ding, ding. This is probably the company.
I was just going to say, ding, ding, ding. There we go.
So Netscape's offices were on the main street of Mountain View, Castro Street, close to El Camino, in kind of a modern building with a boulangerie in the basement, in the ground floor.
I know that building.
I could not wait to go see this group of 4 people and take Mike Homer out to lunch because I felt it. And so I went down, I met the other team members.
So Jim and Mark Andreessen.
And Mark Andreessen and the other founders there in bare feet. Couldn't wait to take Mike down to the boulangerie, have a sandwich, and just brainstorm with Mike. Because he and I had a really good rapport. I didn't want the engineers to come to lunch. I wanted Mike just to tell me in his own words where he thought this was going.
Yeah.
And he and I fed on each other. Mike knew it first, but I egged him on saying, this is it. This is the Holy Grail. This is what's going to allow everyone to access the internet. They wanted to call it Mozilla, but somebody had naming rights to that, so they called it Netscape Navigator. And once Netscape Navigator was born, the internet was born. And from that, developers could start developing, and the rest is history.